Good morning. The Alpha Day, the Committee on General Government Operations, Appropriation, and Housing is now called to order. For the record, today is Tuesday, June 16, 2020, and the time now is 10 o'clock. Notice for this budget hearing was disseminated via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets. First notice was issued on June 8th, second was on June 12th. The committee will hear and accept testimonies on Bill 282-35 LS, the fiscal year 2021 appropriation act as requested by the governor relative to the Department of Youth Affairs fiscal year 2021 budget. I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues that have joined me this morning, and there is Senator Kelly Marsh Taitano and Senator Mary Camacho Torres. General rules for the budget hearing. The conduct of this budget hearing shall be as follows. Those testifying on behalf of the department will be recognized by the chair, by myself, and you are already invited to the panel. Written testimony shall be submitted to the committee. Please provide my legislative staff with your written testimony for photocopy. Testimony may be read. Testimony shall be confined to the substance. We're talking about your budget. Individuals will be allowed to present oral testimony. And once you're done, you may be asked to remain in the room for questions or for additional testimony, as may be desired by the members of the committee. Proper form and decorum shall be practiced by all present in the public hearing room for this proceeding. Individuals who fail to maintain proper form and decorum may be restricted from providing oral testimony and/or may be asked to leave or be escorted, removed from the room. When you speak, please make sure that the microphone is on and that you speak into the microphone. You will please state your name. At this time, I ask the panel from the Department of Youth Affairs to rise, and for our Sergeant at Arms to please swear them in. Thank you, Sergeant at Arms. Mrs. Brennan, we will begin discussing your budget, and my understanding is you have slides, ma'am, so you may begin. If you just identify yourself and your colleagues that's with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Committee on General Government Operations, Appropriations, and Housing, thank you for the opportunity to present and request your support for DYA's 2021 budget. We do have a slide presentation. As described in Public Law 14-110, the purpose of DYA is to improve the quality of life on Guam through the implementation of programs and services that promote youth development, decrease juvenile delinquency and status offenses, strengthen the family unit, enhance public safety, ensure that offenders are held accountable for their actions, and are provided with the appropriate treatment and support. We operate 3 youth resource centers in Dededo, Agate, and Manila, and 1 youth correctional facility and cottage homes for status offenders on island. Unfortunately, we're most known for our youth correctional facility. And that is where a great chunk of our budget comes from. We value our front-end work in the community and believe the old adage that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. It's better to stop something from happening in the first place than to repair the damage after it has happened. So, in comparison, our FY 2020 budget to our FY 2020 budget request, I'm sorry, next slide, please. So again, our mission is basically to promote activities in the community to create positive youth development. We operate a youth correctional facility and cottage homes, as well as 3 community resource centers. Unfortunately, in the community, we're best known for our work in the youth corrections facility, and that is where the bulk of our budget comes from. Next slide. So, in comparison to our FY 2020 budget, our budget request for FY 2021 is just $209,000 more, and that will go towards organic growth, the salary increments, as well as government expenses related to retirement. It went from 26% to 28%. As you can see, the bulk of our other expenses pretty much are minimal. So with FY 2021 coming up, any unexpected and unfunded necessary projects will be funded as they have been in the past, with anticipated lapses and attrition due to recruitment lags. Therefore, in order to run our operation in FY 2021, we ask for your full support of our budget. Next slide. So these are the funding levels by fund source, and as you can see, in 2018, in order to defend our budget, you can see that majority of our fund source, 98%, came from the general fund and 2% from the Healthy Futures special funds. DYA's funding was reduced in 2019 by approximately $407,000 from the FY 2018 level. We survived the shortfall because of recruitment lags and military deployment. In 2020, the Guam legislature resurrected the Summer Youth Employment Program, and we worked really hard to create a program that would work for this summer. Unfortunately, COVID happened. Our overall general fund appropriations to fund the program was $600,000, and it also came from the general fund. DYA was also given an increase in our special funds to accommodate the 2019 reduction, the overall budget reduction. But this increase was necessary as we filled authorized vacancies and other statutory personnel costs. Currently, due to recruitment lags, DYA still has 8 positions that we have yet to fill. Next slide. Historical funding levels. Since 2016, pretty much DYA's budget was about $5.9 million, almost $6 million. The department had been status quo and then slowly decreased in 2018 and then significantly in 2019 for a cumulative total of $556,000, forcing the department to reduce all operational costs, institute cost containment, and I will say that one of the most significant cost containment is in the area of overtime. So we went in 2016 from $116,000 in overtime to, in 2019, I believe it was, it went from 116 to less than 7,000. Our funding woes continue to hamper recruitment of replacement staff. Financial relief, again, was realized through attrition due to lags in the recruitment process, those who have retired, and resignations or deployments. Next slide, please. Here's just our 4-year budget for DYA operations. You can see through the years the trend. Again, fund sources for operations include the general and special funds, the Healthy Futures Fund. In 2020 and 2021, the fund source also includes the Summer Youth Employment Program from the general fund, as authorized by the legislature. Next slide. Once again, just so that you can clearly see, the expenditures by fiscal year center around salaries and benefits through the years. We have been able to cost contain overtime. We have been able to save in operations, but it is really crippling when we only have salaries and benefits. The other thought that came to mind was we focus so much on the correctional facility that we have little time to do intervention work, and little time to do reentry work. And that's most critical when we talk about the pipeline from DYA to DOC. Next slide. Again, here's our 5-year full-time equivalent levels, and you will see that most of the vacancies, most of the positions are with our youth correctional facility. My office has myself, the deputy director, and an executive secretary who basically is working as our payroll clerk, due again to recruitment lags. Next slide. Next slide, please. Sorry about the technical difficulties. There were just a few more slides that I wanted to present. I'm not sure why it's not working, but I did want to talk about the challenges. Obviously, you've seen that our budget is primarily for salaries and benefits. The recruitment of staff, like all other agencies, has been difficult, especially with our correctional officers making the least amount on the correctional officer totem pole. We're working very, very closely with the Department of Administration on updating our position descriptions and our PDQs, and I do see a light at the end of the tunnel. Okay, and so the next, this next slide just has the full-time equivalent information. The full-time equivalents for the youth correctional side is at 55. Currently, we have just 44 officers with 4 vacant positions pending. The youth correctional staff and other non-law enforcement positions actually total 97 positions. Currently, we're functioning with 78 positions. And again, most of those are the 44 that come from the youth correctional facility. Within the youth community resource centers, there are about 4 staff each at each of the centers and about 4 within the Department of Youth Affairs. Those are social workers that assist kids both in the correctional facility and out in the community. So ways that we have augmented our staff are by asking the Department of Labor to give us senior citizen staff to assist us in the centers and in the youth correctional facility, at least in the admin side, and also Department of Labor's youth employment services assistants to act as community program aides. Next slide. Here are the outstanding recruitment, the vacant positions. I have a Social Services Supervisor 1. It's pending announcement. The GG1 is with the Department of Administration. I have 1 Program Coordinator 2 waiting. We're waiting on a list of certified eligibles. 2 Youth Service Worker 1s, those are our correctional officers. 2 Youth Service Worker Position 1s pending certified list at DOA. And 1 is actually, the start date is later this month, next week. 1 maintenance specialist pending certified list, and I think it's just important for you folks to know that of all our facilities, right now we currently only have 2 maintenance workers. And additionally, we are waiting on, a payroll clerk to GG1 is currently in progress. Next slide, please. Our challenges, again, like with all government agencies, our challenges are recruitment of good qualified staff and being able to sustain them. Additionally, DYA does not have an adequate case management system, so it's difficult to track information and data to drive policy and to drive what treatment programs actually work. Additionally, skills and training are necessary. We would like to see more evidence-based practices, more evidence-based programs. And these are programs that are designed and are proven to really change outcomes. Additionally, we do need training in adolescent brain development. Adolescents are very different from adults. They have a higher capacity to learn and change criminal thinking, and so it's paramount that all our staff receive training when dealing with adolescents. Additionally, all of our clients at the youth correctional facility have some form of trauma, and it's important, it's essential and critical that all staff be trained in trauma-informed care. One thing that's lacking or lagging with the juvenile justice system is reentry. Reentry programs, again, are so important so that we are not a pipeline to DOC. We have pending capital improvement projects, and once I hire my PC2, we're going to go off after more grant opportunities. Senators, those are DYA's challenges. Next slide, please. But we remain hopeful. We believe that kids really are the future. I know that's kind of like a cliche, but we see it. We do see enormous disproportionate minority contact, and we want to address that. We're working alongside other youth-serving agencies, and with you who share our goals, will make it easier to reach our destination. We thank you on behalf of Guam's youth for letting us present to you today.
Thank you, Ms. Brennan. And would you like to introduce your staff that's with you?
I'm so sorry. This is my very capable administrative service officer, Jeanette Tobish. She prepared the charts that you saw on the presentation.
All right, thank you. I'd like to also recognize my colleagues that have joined us this morning. We have to my immediate left would be the Speaker Tina Munoz Barnes, and to my right would be Senator Amanda Shelton, the Oversight Chair of Department of Youth Affairs. And down below we have Minority Leader Senator Tello Taitagui. We have Senator Jim Moylan, Senator Sabina Perez, and down below is Senator Luis Munoz. Ms. Brennan, I have a few questions I would like to ask before I ask the Oversight Chair to ask. Based on a report provided by the governor regarding the coronavirus relief funds, DYA was approved funding of $115,285. Please explain what the funds will be utilized for.
Thank you, Senator. So we did receive $115,000 for COVID response, and I have to say that I wish it was $115,000 that I could use for recruitment. Unfortunately, I could only ask for a full-time nurse practitioner, and that is so that we wouldn't have to expose the children that were already at the youth correctional facility to the outside. So basically, when the emergency declaration was placed, we immediately put protocols together to keep the kids contained at the Department of Youth Affairs. I asked for a nurse practitioner. Unfortunately, we hired one, and she was pulled away for other duties, and so we're still trying to recruit. And that's what most of the funding was for. Additionally, we had to get PPEs for both staff and the children.
So that's what the 115 was for?
And also to pay for a water filtration system. Our officers had been going out into the community, and so to avoid unnecessary contact with the larger community, we put in a water filtration system. We also put in money for, and we haven't received it yet, but we put in money for Zoom conferencing, and that way counselors, attorneys, and hearings could take place rather than moving the kids in and out of the facility. Additionally, we asked for the additional power consumption and the ability to stand up a quarantine facility within our facility to receive new admissions.
And Ms. Brennan, how will this assistance impact your request for 2021? In other words, is there anything in your pre-pandemic budget that was covered by the relief funds?
Unfortunately, it was all COVID related. As you have seen in my budget, it's primarily salaries and benefits. And so the one great thing that I can say is we're eventually going to have a full-time nurse. And I don't know how we survived with only a contractual one, but I think that's so important to address the critical needs of the kids in the facility.
Okay.
That was $115,000. I wish I would have asked for $1 million.
Yes, I wish they would have given you more. But anyway, how many DYA admissions are there for 2020?
For 2020, I believe was less than last year. So 2019, there was a total of 361 admissions. But I can tell you that on a daily basis, there are about 50 youth under our custody, with about 30 residing in the youth correctional facility and 20 that are out in the community released on furlough. So typically, I would say during a month, we would get a little over 30. So if you calculate that, we would have had about 60 admissions. Obviously, when COVID occurred, we did get with our youth-serving agencies and GPD and ask that all low-level offenses be given notice to peers rather than admitted. And so we were very lucky that admissions were relatively low and we were able to keep the transmission of COVID down.
All right. What's the average cost for each admission? And the reason why I ask that is because they have 24-hour service care that include food, water, room, and etc.
So I think that the last time we calculated the average cost was about $191.
All right.
I'm sorry, excuse me, I'm sorry.
I know that the COVID-19 pretty much almost took the rest of the year, but do you have a summer apprenticeship program? Even though we have a very short summer now?
No, we don't.
Okay.
We recognize that we don't have the capacity to handle that at this point.
All right. How is your youth, runaway, homeless, and abuse programs coming along?
That is the pass-through account?
No, just how is your youth, runaways, homeless, and abuse program? How is it coming along? I mean, how is the program, because you still have clients, right?
That's correct.
So how's the program?
Okay, what I can tell you is that during COVID, the youth correctional facility had low admissions. What was significantly higher was our admissions to cottage homes. Currently, and that is for runaway youth, children that are duly involved with both Child Protective Service, the child welfare system, and the juvenile justice system. And so those numbers have increased during COVID. I don't know if it's, many of it was related to some instances of beyond control with family violence. So those numbers have increased during this time period. And we're working very closely with the employees from the community resource centers to keep them active on a daily basis with programs and activities.
And my final question is, if you received the 209,000 more, would that make DYA whole?
Well, that would fill our vacancies and account for them and sustain them through the next year. What is really critical is filling the PC2 position, the Program Coordinator 2 position, so that we can actually go after grants to fund programs and activities.
Ms. Brennan, if you got the budget you asked, would that make DYA whole? Would that complete what you needed to do what you need to do, to go after grants and whatever?
Yes, sir. That would be ideal.
All right, that's just 209. Thank you. Senator Amanda, the Oversight Chair, and you'll be followed by the Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here, Mrs. Brennan, Ms. Chovas. I appreciate your time and all the work that you and the team continue to do at DYA, especially during this time of crisis for everyone. So first, I'd like to ask about the status of schooling within the facility. You still have clients who are living within your correctional facility, and so I know that we had teachers who were coming from the Department of Education. Has all of that been put on hold during this time?
So initially, yes. When we went into closure, they were not able to come in, but they did send paperwork that the youth were assigned. And now, last week and again this week, I'm meeting with Dr. Carmen Garrido, who is in charge of the Lihing Famagun, the school program within DYA. There has been some CARES money that Guam DOE has at, so I have asked if distance learning can occur with our youth correctional facility. So that is something that's already in the works. I'm meeting with DOE about that.
Okay, and so in that discussion, maybe there will be talks of the need for Wi-Fi at the facility and what will be provided through the CARES Act funding?
Yes, and so that was one of the items, and I'm sorry I didn't mention it, that we did ask for that capability so that we could do that.
That's great. I'm glad to hear, and I hope that once the regular teaching, face-to-face teaching commences again, that we will still have teachers coming to the facility. I think that face-to-face interaction is especially important for the clients of the Department of Youth Affairs. And I'd like to ask you about the facilities that you have. If you can share with my colleagues here today, list out all of the facilities that you have, the resource centers, the cottage home, and what you have within the campus at DYA.
So currently, the Department of Youth Affairs operates 3 community resource centers in Agate, Manila, and Dededo. These resource centers help after-school kids, latchkey kids, as well as kids from juvenile probation have time to engage in positive youth development activities after school and during school intersessions. Agate has a capacity of 50 kids. It's always maxed out. I know that you visited once and you saw. We often have to use the Agate gym just for recreational activities. Additionally, Manila has a capacity of 80 kids, and Dededo as well, 80 kids. But every year there's a waiting list because these community resource centers are very, very much needed in the community. Parents have asked us if there's some way we can expand, and we're looking at opportunities. We did apply for a GORA grant last year, but unfortunately, I think the fire department got that grant. Additionally, we operate the Youth Correctional Facility. The facility has the capacity of about 102 kids. Because of juvenile justice reform efforts, that number has declined steadily since 2015. At that time, I believe there were 80 kids, and today, currently, we actually have a little over 30 at the Youth Correctional Facility and 20 that remain in the community. Cottage homes right now is a temporary interim cottage homes. We managed to put it outside of the main facility. It's not fenced. It provides a more residential-like setting for kids that are charged with status offenses, those offenses that are beyond control, curfew, and truancy that you wouldn't normally be arrested for if you were an adult. And so those kids are all at cottage homes, which is still on our compound. There are currently 11 kids residing in cottage homes, and that number has seen an increase since last year.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And I asked that question and I asked you to share that because though it may seem like you are relatively a small agency compared to our other agencies that get much more funding, you do have quite a large mission. And aside from what the public knows about the corrections facility, you do have other mandates, and that is to help all youth, lead a better life, and whether that's providing the child care services after school or the cottage home facility, you do have a lot of work on your plate. So I thank you for that. And is there any plan right now to reopen the resource centers for summer activities? Is that on the radar yet?
So I have community resource center staff currently involved in activities and programs within our youth correctional facility. So I've just basically reassigned the staff since our kids remain in the facility 24/7. There's much to say about being isolated and being basically in solitary confinement. And I guess even for my own kids, they had difficulty being quarantined for so long. You can imagine what the kids in the youth correctional facility and cottage homes have been through. And so we've just reshifted staff for now so that they could engage in positive youth development activities with the youth correctional staff. So at this point, we are not going to reopen the centers. We are looking at following GDOE's reopening of the actual public school system.
Okay. I'm glad that you're following a plan to keep everyone safe and all of the clients safe and engaged during this time. Thank you for that. A couple of months ago, we heard bill number 244, which was to reclassify your youth service workers to youth correction or juvenile correction officers. And I know during that discussion, we heard that DYA was also working directly with DOA to accomplish this administratively. I want to know what the status is, if that has happened yet, or if this is still something we should be pursuing on our side. As I understand, your additional cost in the 2021 budget for personnel doesn't seem to account for this $200,000 balance that we would see if we reclassified these workers. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, thank you for bringing that up, Senator. The reclassification process isn't as easy as one would think. I'm working very, very closely with this administration. They have promised to assist us, and what has happened so far since our discussions and since that bill was introduced is we've met with the governor and we've met with DOA. Some of the job position descriptions had not been redone since 1980. That's decades old, and with everything that's going on with juvenile justice reform, Prison Rape Elimination Act standards, just juvenile facility standards overall, we've had to work on those updates. Those updates were submitted in February, reviewed by DOA. There were some questions, and we've recently resubmitted them, as well as the position description questionnaires. That is where we're at right now. We're working very, very closely with DOA so that there is no lag, and we're following this up. And the reason why the money wasn't included was because the governor has committed to helping with this reclassification process.
Okay, so would you say our estimate of the $200,000 in the bill is still an accurate estimate if this reclassification were to happen before the next budget year?
That would probably be still an accurate figure to go by. However, I do know that the distinction was we wanted to be at least at the same level as adult correctional officers.
Yes.
And what we're seeing is that juvenile correctional officers actually have a few more distinctions that need to be recognized, and that is working with the adolescent, understanding the neuroscience behind adolescent brain development, and understanding emotional regulation, being trauma-informed, and understanding that the kids are that we receive through the juvenile justice system must be treated not only fairly, but it must somehow, their intersection with the juvenile justice system must be beneficial so that we can improve outcomes overall and enhance public safety.
Okay, thank you. We'll continue to work with you to make sure that amount is accurate and see that reclassification through, whether it is through this legislation or done administratively. We know that it's something that your youth service workers have been asking for and working towards for many years now, and we want to support that change for them. And Mrs. Brennan, if you can just give us an update on the renovation of your administrative buildings. I understand that you were counting on some federal funds to start rebuilding those. I know they're in terrible shape, and your admin staff have all been putting up with that for a long time. If you can just give us an update on where we are.
So we did recently submit the paperwork to BBMR. It still is quite a lengthy process. NEPA review? We are close to the authorization to proceed. I do know that that it just passed agriculture, I want to say late March, and so it finally did go back to BBMR.
Okay.
I'm hopeful that we'll be breaking ground soon.
Us too. I saw the the facilities, and I was really concerned about your health and safety. All of the admin workers, if you are in those kind of facilities and unable to do your work properly to serve our youth, then that's a disservice to all of us. So I'm glad to hear that we're moving along with that. And thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity, and thank you again for being here today.
Thank you, Senator Amanda. Madam Speaker, you have any questions, ma'am?
Yes, Sidus Masi, Mr. Chair. Manana Sidus, thank you, Mrs. Brennan and Ms. T, right? For Tovis for bringing your presentation to us this morning. As the good Oversight Chair had inquired several of the questions that I wanted to work with, I'm glad we have answers to some of that. I think more importantly, as I was looking at the trend of your FTEs and the budget that you have, and knowing that it's literally been up and down because of you trying to make best do with what you've been provided. I know that the good Oversight has asked if you were to get everything with the mere increase that you were asking for, would that be whole? And you said yes. I know that there were some positions that were taken away or there, because if in a perfect world you would have had 97 employees and now you have 86, but 6 positions literally need to be filled, and that hold up is with Department of Administration. Is that a correct statement to say? On the positions, on the 6 positions, right? You have here 6 positions that have not been filled.
That's correct. And there are, I think that sometimes just getting a list of eligibles is a difficult procedure. And I know that with the Social Services Supervisor 1, there was some kind of compensation or classification issue, but we are working really well with DYA to try to overcome that. Some of the lags actually kept us afloat too. Like, we save money when we don't hire, and so it is what it is. The recruitment process is a lengthy process, and I'm hopeful that we're going to fill all those positions by the end of this fiscal year. So
that's good to hear, because I understand the criticalness based on this. And the other question that I wanted to ask Mr. Chair is, how many employees within the department do you think that will be retiring within this end of the fiscal year or in the beginning quarter of next fiscal year? Do you have any employees that will be retiring?
I actually have several employees who are eligible, but I only know of one that is actually considering it at this point.
Mr. Chair, I want to make sure that DYA has the resources that it needs, and having worked with them for many, many years in my past career, I know the criticalness and making sure that the clients that you entertain, that they be given that opportunity to re-enter, Sometimes they just need that helping hand, and Department of Youth Affairs has been more of that, at least a training facility for them to get into, re-enter the community, to know that there is a brighter future for them. And I think it's important that the resources that you need should be given to you. And I know that during these trying times, it's really hard to balance, right? So we look at the possibilities, if resources could be allocated for the COVID, to pay the COVID, for COVID-related issues that are happening within that kind of can help out for a little bit. And then making sure that we look at all opportunities for grants, and even local grants. Has DYA had the opportunity to look at any local grants within the community that you can strive for? And I know you're looking for one of those positions to do that, but in the meantime, have there been anything that may be hopeful for this coming fiscal year?
So, and thank you for your very supportive message. And when I first took the helm at DYA, the department had just one federal grant that they were working with, and that was the Title II formula grant, which is a formula. You basically put in your application and you get a set amount, and that amount was about $74,000. And they had been, there were some problems with reporting because, again, there was only one PC, a PC1 handling that, as well as a Prison Rape Elimination Act trying to implement those high standards to our youth correctional facility. So with only one PC1, it was quite an undertaking to go after that, to clean up the reports that needed to be cleaned up. But we were also able to apply for a PREA grant. It was called a PREA, Prison Rape Elimination Act Targeted Implementation Grant. And I had the PC1, one of our acting, so to speak, PC1s, work on the grant, and we were able to receive, I believe it was, we doubled the grant. I believe it was $138,000. So we are a recipient of that grant. But that will go to the facility upgrades to make DYA a sexually safer environment for the kids.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I know that during these times, unprecedented times, we have to step outside of that box and look for opportunities out there, and I'm hoping that maybe I can work closely with the director and her team to see what opportunities are there, especially as it relates to re-engaging with our young youths, to troubled youths, to make sure that there's programs that can truly help them during these trying times. And I know that the resources are hard, and based on her knowing that there may be only one that may be eligible to retire, that doesn't give her much room, especially with the need for more employees to do the mission mandate that it's set out to do. So I want to make sure and assure the director and her team that if there's any opportunity that we can work to research new grant opportunities, that I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I'm hoping that we can at least come close to what they really need, because it is important that we re-engage in our youth and set them back into the right path so that they can re-engage into the community and be outstanding citizens. So I just want to thank you guys and your team. And I know that the questions that you answered with the Oversight Chair, I want to say that if there's anything that you need from the Speaker's office as the Oversight Chair for Human Resources, please don't hesitate to come our way also, because we work very well together. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Ms. Brennan, when she was talking about she worked at DYA, she wasn't a client then. But I know that. But then in her younger days, we don't know. But anyway, we'll have
It
now
was public defender.
we'll have Senator Kelly. Your questions, ma'am?
Sidus Maasi, Mr. Chair. And Sidus Maasi for coming here today. This is such an important agency, and I'm really glad that you reminded us all of the mission, excuse me, of the agency, where maybe we focus as a community on certain aspects of it, like the corrections aspects, but it's really about improving the life and quality of all of us in the community and finding ways to uplift the youth, to rehabilitate them, to steer them in positive directions so that they are contributing members of our community. So I'm glad, as I mentioned, that you mentioned that. And one of the things that I was looking at when I was going through the materials is you had mentioned that, and there are a disproportionately high number of Chukis that are there. And I don't want us to lose in the mix, though, that Chamorros make up the second highest. And so there are ways to look at that. The Chukis population is much, much smaller than the Chamorro population, but still overall, these both tell us that something is happening, and something I'm sure that this program, this department is working very hard at trying to understand what those root causes are, because as you said, prevention, an ounce of it is worth a pound of cure. And if we can keep it from happening, that's much better for everybody. So I do find that very unfortunate and very troubling that we have for those two ethnicities such high representation. Do you have any thoughts that you could share maybe in the work that you've been doing as to why for those two groups it is so high? For me, I know of things like feelings of not being able to fit in, feelings of lack of community identity or cultural identity, and things like that can be issues. But what have been the department's findings, and how are they tackling those issues?
So problems with racial and ethnic disparities, I mean, are nationwide. It happens all over the world. And there are certain strategies that agencies, youth-serving agencies, can participate in to help reduce those disparities. So for the Department of Youth Affairs, what we've done is we've really engaged with our stakeholders. Manetlu has been incredibly helpful in coming in and engaging with our youth and doing it in a way where it's not segregated. It's together with all the other kids and just increasing their self-esteem, increasing their skills and abilities in activities that maybe outside they wouldn't be able ordinarily to partake in. We've done stuff with the Guahan, the Council of Humanities, Civic Reflections. We're bringing in activities to help promote positive youth development. We're bringing in activities that keep the families also engaged and aware of what's going on, as well as opportunities in our community resource centers that highlight law enforcement activities and public safety, like the Junior Police Cadet Program. It's about collaborative approaches with all youth-serving agencies and the juvenile justice system. There's just many ways that we can help and not harm, but understanding that a youth correctional facility actually does more harm for low-level offenders, and having more opportunities, alternatives to detention are one of the areas that we can work with. Because once you intersect with the juvenile justice system, you're pretty much branded, and it follows you throughout your life, regardless if you're a juvenile. So working towards alternatives to detention, like diversion programs, deflection programs, engaging the police more in activities with these youth are important.
Sidus Masi, it's really important to hear about those things because we want to save as many as possible and create positive experiences for them in positive ways, as I said, that they can be contributing. And it really brings to home, I'm so glad to hear that you're prioritizing filling the position that's going to be seeking federal programs and grants, because I think the federal government has a lot of responsibility here. They have treaties with other areas and have created stressors on our community, and they have a lot of responsibility to be doing a better job of helping a community of our size deal with what they are expecting of all of us. And so I think that's a very important thing. One of the things in my reading, I noted that DYA has indicated that they are working towards reducing about 5% a year of the youth coming to the correctional facility. Has DYA had success in reducing recidivism and youth coming to the facility?
So that 5% is what we call like the bare minimum. And what we're trying to do is any youth that comes in to the facility, I've asked the social workers, as soon as they come in, as soon as they're admitted, you work on a transition plan. That way we can better track the recidivism rate, who's coming in, what age group, all the demographics that we need to properly track it. Unfortunately, as I've said before, DYA does not have a case management system, and so tracking really is manual. So since we put that in place, it's been a year now, and so we'd have to manually calculate that. So I can't tell you if we've met that goal yet, but I can say that what we're seeing is not an increase in delinquent acts. What we're seeing is an increase in admissions for cottage homes, which is the status offenses. That's what we're seeing.
And it's good that the tracking is ongoing because that's going to give you real important data that you can work with. It's going to be helpful in applying for grants and all those sort of things, justifying budgets and programs and so forth. And I can see in looking at the budget, you were saying that a lot of this is personnel. And the other way to look at the budget is looking at it by activity. And so as you noted, the Department of, excuse me, not department, but the Youth Corrections is the bulk of the budget. And then the next one, not too far behind it, maybe about half or, well, or a third or a fourth, but is the vocational rehabilitation and support services. So it seems like those are a pretty strong part of what you offer. In the adjustments made going forward, we see that there's more money towards the youth corrections and just a very little bit less towards the rehabilitation and support services, and then the others have very small adjustments. But is there anything that you'd like to mention about those adjustments? Maybe the increase in the youth corrections is towards the facility improvements, or are there other concerns that we need to hear about?
So I'm glad you brought up that point. So basically, we've been operating with basically the same budget, and we've been, any growth is because of organic growth or statutory requirements like retirement that went up, and salary increments. That always is going to show growth if you have your employees, continue to work there. So when you see the lags in retirement and recruitment, that's your savings. It's interesting that you mentioned the vocational rehab and the support services, because at one point we did have an administrator, and when you talk about aftercare, when you talk about reentry, that's so vital to continue the link. So when kids are admitted into the youth correctional facility, nothing magical happens. They don't leave there, being cured or without, criminal attitudes or behaviors. And so it's important that we have a component that follows them through while they're on the outside, but there is no parole for juveniles. And so basically when they're released, when their cases are terminated, they go back into the communities without the aftercare that's necessary, I think. And so they need to continue to link, especially since a majority of our clients are on that threshold of adulthood. And so you want to make sure that they have the proper links to services and inventory of services. And so that is a focus that I had hoped to gain through, grant funding. I really want to add a reentry component to our department.
Thank you. Senator Kelly, do you have any more
Yes.
questions?
No, I just want to give a concluding statement. So
All right.
it's so good to hear that you're developing that reentry program, because it does seem that that's so important. And the goal here is to change behaviors, to make a difference, like I've said already, to make them contributing community members. I mean, that's going to really just provide that sense of pride in oneself, and really that needs to be one of our ultimate goals, and I'm very glad that you see that. And it's also really important to hear about those alternatives, the diversion, the deflection programs, and we need to hear as a community and as policymakers that those correctional facilities can do more harm to youth, and that we really need to look at these alternatives and find ways that we can be supporting them and bolstering them. It just seems that throughout the system, we're seeing the courts having more success with therapeutic systems. We're seeing that you are looking at those programs because they are developing more success. And so I think we need to continue to hear that as a community and as leaders. Siduos Maasi, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Mary Torres, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mrs. Brennan, it's always good to see you and to hear your presentation. I recall at one of the presentations, I believe by the State of the Judiciary maybe a year ago, that the number of detainees at DYA has actually gone down, even pre-COVID-19, perhaps because of the juvenile justice reforms, that measures that have been implemented at the courts, which you are very well aware and familiar with. But the question that I have is, in your slide titled Challenges, you mention under skill and training the different things that are important to DYA, such as evidence-based practices and adolescent brain development. You discuss this, trauma-informed care and reentry focus. Your summary, though, in that slide talks a lot about cost containment and how you've been able to survive because of savings as a result of either vacancies in positions or procurement that didn't come to fruition. But knowing what you know about the success of the reentry programs and diversion and deflection programs, what is it that you see as a way to achieve these goals that you laid out in your challenges slide, which is so integral to the success of DYA? How do you propose accomplishing those goals?
Thank you. So for me, working collaboratively with the judiciary, with Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness, working with other youth-serving agencies allows us to take part in trainings and opportunities that we ordinarily wouldn't be able to take part in. Also, working, I guess what has happened lately, especially of late, is we're all using, we're going to webinars, free webinars on the OJJDP website. The Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention has allowed us to take part in trauma-informed care webinars and evidence-based practice webinars, and it keeps us in touch with what programs are effective. So without having to spend very much money, we're able to schedule and participate in these trainings. But working collaboratively and networking with other youth-serving agencies on Guam, Senator, has allowed us to learn more about what works, what is out in the community. We're focused on getting an inventory of resources so that when our kids leave, they actually have a directory of assistance, basically. You can go here, you can call this if you have any issues. And that's part of reentry. So not having the funds is no excuse for actually working on what we know is available.
And from that response, we are so fortunate that you are at the helm, and I say that most sincerely.
Thank you.
But now, knowing that the trend is towards reducing the number of kids that are detained by DYA, does that have a corresponding effect on the number of personnel needed at DYA, or is that not a correlation that we should anticipate in terms of personnel levels?
So, I know that was going to be a question. With our declining numbers at the Youth Correctional Facility, how can our youth service workers be helpful in the community? If I have social workers and if I have an aftercare program, it will be the youth service workers that will accompany social workers on late night activities. When somebody is, probably picked up for a curfew offense, does not need to be incarcerated, but simply needs a ride home, it will be those youth service workers that will be doing the community work out there as well.
And that is precisely the answer that I was hoping to get from you. So thank you very much. Mr. Chair, I have no further questions.
Thank you, Senator Mary. Senator Tello, ma'am.
Sidus Masi, Mr. Chair, and good morning to my colleagues, and good morning, ladies. Thank you so much for being here today. First I want to say, Ms. Torres, a nice PowerPoint. I especially like the $ that you did. Oh, that was you?
I just did the graphics.
The graphics? Well, this $ is the one that, it's a winner. Yeah, and that's basically what's happening right now. It's always good to put a little humor into everything, and try not to be so serious. But, DYA has been something very special to my heart. I've contributed some time there and spoke with the ladies there during Christmas time and bringing them music and some things during the holidays. As the former director of the Women's Bureau, one of the things that I was finding out when I worked with Department of Corrections and helping the women there, that many of them have been part of the DYA system, many of them. So it was then that I noticed that, then I realized that I really need to focus a lot of my attention on DYA. Let's not let these women get to that point, or anyone get to that point from DYA, then just transfer to a bigger facility, which is down the street. So it does mean a lot. This is the opportunity for programs, assistance with family involvement, community involvement for these children, and whatever we can do to help. That's why it's really important, because you are at the base of molding these individuals into being part of the society, our community, a good part of it. So I do know that you're asking for a little bit more money. And realizing that, I tried to do some research and finding some assistance. And one of the areas I found is the Healthy Futures Fund. So, Mr. Chair, I know you're listening to me right now, but there seems to be a little bit of a surplus going on in the Healthy Futures Fund. And if I'm not mistaken, it's around $212,000 right now, but they anticipate by the end of FY 2020 to be about a little over $1 million. So I'm hoping the good chair can find the money for your agency there in the Healthy Futures Fund, if it's still going in that direction. I don't know so much about the general fund right now. It's not trailing as well as we'd hope to. And even in FY 2021, it's going to be quite difficult too as well. But whatever we can do to push forward, I will be there advocating for DYA, especially because of your building facilities. I know this is something that has always been an issue at DYA. Are you still using padlocks for your sales, the cells? Are you still using padlocks?
Unfortunately, we still are using padlocks. We did get some capital improvement money to change the perimeter fence to make it look less penal and more like a residential setting, as well as to get automated locks on all those cell doors. It is archaic, it is an issue, but we do have a funding source.
Okay.
But with the capital improvement projects, for some reason, it's just like pulling teeth. It's a long and painful process.
Is it because of procurement or something on obtaining these doors,
No, the administrative buildings were covered with that first grant, and now the second capital improvement project is underway. So it's just timing. These things just don't happen that quickly, Senator.
Right, absolutely, I understand. But if there's anything we can do to
I
push that
appreciate
along,
that.
because these padlocks have been in place for a long time, it's something that's really, at the forefront. If anything that needs to be improved is to change that scenario there. And also, I know that you're going to be losing a couple female officers to retirement. And I'm hoping that you put some effort in hiring more women there at the facility. So that's just a comment there, to get some more women. Has there been any cost in overtime?
Again, that was part of the presentation. I'm really happy that
Sorry,
we've been
I missed
able.
that.
Yeah, we've been really happy to report that because of cost containment, we've kept it down. We've managed to work the shifts a little bit better. Of course, there were some overtime expenses during this whole COVID epidemic because we did let some of our officers work with the GPD task force to help identify kids that were running around outside and that did not need to be detained. So we really worked closely with GPD. We've been managing our overtime really well, Senator, so I think that's one of our accomplishments.
Okay, well, overtime costs so much more than just being able to fill the other positions. So that's the best cost efficiency that we can put forward, our foot forward on that, and fill those vacant positions.
Thank you.
Stop the overtime. Again, thank you for your presentation today. Really appreciate it, and good luck to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tello. Senator Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director. Other than the nurse that was pulled away from your department, the one hired by the CARES funding, is there any other employees at DYA that are detailed outside of your department?
I have two community resource aides, community program aides, that came from the resource centers that are currently closed, that are detailed to the Department of Labor at this time to help with the pandemic unemployment assistance program. I do have officers that are detailed to the curfew task force, but we've been able to use night shift individuals, and they only leave when the youth are already sleeping. So I think we're managing it really well. Again, I have the community program aides that are normally working within the resource centers detailed to our own facility to help with programs and activities for the different youth that we have there.
Okay. At GDOL, would you know, are they functioning with the assisting people to apply a WIPUA?
Yes, they went through the training and are currently assisting
All right.
with that program.
Thank you. You mentioned on the challenges, talking about the recruitment lags. If you can, let's say today you got the money and you need 4 new employees, summarize for us.
So for
these
example, we had one individual a couple weeks ago, a youth service worker one or assistant? KK is assistant. We had a youth service worker assistant who is entry level take a job with the judiciary. So he had let us know that he was going to leave, and we pushed forward the paperwork. We told him, but of course that can't happen until he actually leaves. So 2 weeks later, we pushed the paperwork down to BBMR, and then it goes to DOA, and then at DOA, if there's a list of eligibles, I would say within a month's time, they're able to schedule interviews. But if there is no list of eligibles, then they have to announce the position, and then after the announcement, there's a certain amount of time, and then after a certain amount of time, people can appeal that decision. So it is a lengthy process. I'm not real familiar with it other than being at the other end and saying, where's my position? We're hurting. And that's when we do accrue overtime, when we have positions like that that are scheduled on the shift, and we have no one else but current workers to replace them, those hours.
That youth service job that went to judiciary, I'm certain it's the pay, right?
It's always the pay, sir.
So where does your, for a youth service worker?
We fall at least 2 letter grades below all other law enforcement currently.
And that was based on the position title that you're wanting to change, is that correct? Is there something dealing with that?
You know, I'm not sure about the history in that, but I do know that when I was researching it, the position description that the Department of Administration had not evolved since, or had not been amended since 1980. And I understand that my employees were saying, we've been working on this, for years and years and years, and nothing's come to fruition. But really, when you look at the paperwork, there is no history of it ever being attempted to be updated. And again, since I came on board, there are all these requirements that my officers need to be aware of. There are standards within juvenile justice, the Office of Delinquency Prevention, that you must be aware of. And so we've instituted the trainings necessary, and they're hard concepts to understand. It talks about disproportionate minority populations and how to work with them, how to work with adolescents, and separating adults from juveniles, and the harm that incarceration can do. There's just so much that is involved. And then, of course, there's the Prison Rape Elimination Act, and that came out in, I believe, 2003. And there had been no advances at the Department of Youth Affairs to make it a sexually safer environment. So I had to look at, my sister agency, Department of Corrections, to see where they were at in all of this. And I had to get the training. And again, we found free training on the website, the Prison Rape Elimination Act Resource Center. And so all our officers now have been trained at least in that one aspect.
Okay, so in addition to the lag that you see in filling those positions, you also have a disparity in pay that would make folks go elsewhere. So that's your additional struggle. Thank you for that. And also, then you expressed the lags in procurement process. Can you give us an example of that, please?
So do you want to talk about the chillers? You want to talk about the, yeah. So, whenever whenever anything, for example, when our chillers broke down, we operate a galley. We have 3 cooks, and when our chillers went down, obviously that's, to me that's like an emergency, and we were going through even the emergency process, and it was quite lengthy. And so what we did was we asked employees, hey, do you have a freezer? Can you bring that in, because our meat's going to spoil? And that was early on in 2019, and I believe it took at least 6 months, 6 to 7 months to resolve, even on an emergency basis. And I'm not going to pretend. I, as a director, I had to take the first module, and it was, I understand, but at the same time, I'm not privy to all that happens at GSA. I'm just saying that it does take long. If there isn't a vendor that bids or puts a proposal out, then I don't know what happens after that. I just know that even in an emergency situation like that, even when we have the money available, it still is a lengthy process.
Sounds pretty bad. I appreciate that example. So you're saying for your galley, your freezer broke down, your meat was going to spoil. Fortunately, you had some caring employees that stepped up, but it still took you 6 months to get a refrigerator.
Chillers. And the components needed for the chiller. But, it wasn't just employees. We were already working with other agencies. We already knew who we could ask just in case we needed this space. But, fortunately, yeah, we were able to work it out just within our own department.
So we need to fix our procurement process.
I can't comment at that. I believe that since that time, it has gotten better. It has gotten better, and...
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Jim. Senator Sabina Paris, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that great segue, Senator Moylan. So I do oversee procurement, so I'm really intrigued, first of all, about that. But before I get into that, I do remember, I just appreciate, thank you, Ms. Brennan and Ms. Tovis, for your presentation. I think it highlighted some of the key points in the budget that I've seen, from attrition to reduction in revenues. And I also recall from a year ago that even during your nomination hearing, Ms. Brennan, you were talking about the importance of diversion and reentry projects, and I'm full support of that. And so in looking at how COVID has impacted, I'm appreciative of all my colleagues' questions, and I share a lot of their sentiments regarding the operations. So it's interesting, it's insightful, the answers that you brought in regards to how you've adjusted to COVID and shifting some of your workforce from, let's say, the resource center to the correctional facility. I'm also curious to see, this is a time to kind of reevaluate how we operate as a government and in response to what may be the new normal. And also in looking at how this could be also an opportunity to reinvigorate this reentry diversion strategy. I'm just curious to see what, have you reevaluated it in regards to the changes and the shifting of operations? Is there an opportunity that exists?
I believe there was an opportunity pre-COVID to look at alternatives to detention. Again, you look at all the research, and it shows that once a child intersects with the juvenile justice system, it can either be beneficial or it can be really harmful. And one of the routes to being harmful is to incarcerate children. Now, I have always been a big proponent on if we have a violent offender, a repeat offender, then yes, it can be looked upon as punitive, but yes, go ahead and send them to the Department of Youth Affairs, to our correctional facility. But even prior to COVID, I was telling the chief of police that really if it's a low-level offense, if it's something that can be handled with a notice to appear later on, it's way better than bringing them to the Department of Youth Affairs, even if it's only for one night, until their preliminary hearing. So alternatives to even deflect, to say, to check if this individual, if this youth has had prior contact with the system, and if he has not, if it's a first offender and it's a minor offense, to even maybe deflect him, to bring him home, talk to the parents, give them that one chance, and maybe that will be his last contact. So opportunities for deflection are already in discussion. Prior to COVID, I met weekly with the governor and the public safety team, and that was one of my big things. We need to have more diversion opportunities. We need alternatives to detention. Right now, I have Sanctuary as a place, other than DYA, I have Sanctuary, and their bed space, and it's always tied up because of dual status kids who are already involved with Child Protective Services. And I was explaining how during COVID, we had a rise with cottage homes kids. So youth correctional facility admissions went down, cottage homes, the admissions went up, and that's because there was no space. When kids had issues at home, there was no foster home, Sanctuary wasn't open, so guess what? They came to the Department of Youth Affairs at cottage homes. That's why placement is such an issue, and so we need to look at alternatives. As nonprofits, I think that, besides Sanctuary being the only game in town, other nonprofits should really engage and explore opportunities, because that's where I think we'll find the most success and better outcomes for the youth that are already involved, especially dual status youth that are involved in Child Protective Services and with the justice system. We need more alternative residential settings for these youth.
And so the cottage facilities provide that alternative, or is it different?
I have to be honest, it is an interim cottage homes. Cottage homes used to be, the original cottage homes used to be in Talafofo, and that building just is in need of so much repair. The skylight over time leaked, and it ruined all the electrical and the plumbing. And so that building is in, it needs money. It needs to be repaired. But it was the ideal place. It was away from the city, so to speak, and it had adequate staffing, and it really was like a residential setting. Our ECHO unit that was vacated because of juvenile justice reform efforts, because the population went down, we were able to isolate it and make it, but it's cell blocks. We took off the doors, or we bolted the doors, secured them to the walls, but it still has that look of a correctional facility. As much as we try to change it, it still has that appearance. The kids don't wear uniforms, they walk around freely, they have activities outside, but it still is on the compound. So yes, I believe that as a community, we need more homes, we need more residential type facilities for these kids that really don't belong in a youth correctional facility or the interim cottage homes at this time. We have a lot of placement issues, that they're there and they have a beyond control case, and that's the only thing that's holding them at DYA and placement. So if I had a house open up tomorrow, I could fill it with kids both in the youth correctional facility and within cottage homes. A majority of my clients are not dangerous. A majority just don't have a place to go.
So do you see this opportunity to shift the use of the funds towards these more diversionary projects at this time?
Yes, I do, and I'm working very closely again with other child serving agencies to work on these types of opportunities.
That's great to hear. The other thing that was brought up was let's see, there are a couple of things. Partnerships, I think, were pretty key, and I think that's essential when you want to maximize resources. What is your partnership with GDOE like, and do you see any potentials there for opportunities?
So as you know, the Department of Youth Affairs has our own educational program, which is part of GDOE. It's headed by Dr. Carmen Garrido, and she has a staff of 5. We work very, very closely with her to help those kids closest to graduation graduate before they leave. Again, it's linking kids that are just about to become adults with the right credentials, the right skills, and the right links to services already in the community so that they have a chance at success when they are released. Again, an aftercare program would be ideal. I currently have just the staff that I have. I envision one day having a really, really small youth correctional facility population so that I can move my officers out in the community to follow up with these young adults.
That's great to hear. So the other thing that I was thinking about is successional planning. So, you've said so yourself that you have some challenges in regards to recruitment and retention, and partly because of the wage imbalance or within the government itself. So I was thinking, how feasible is it for some of the youth to actually fill these positions in the future, as part of their youth leadership, moving away from the pipeline to the jails, but pipeline back into jobs?
So you're asking if some of the youth that are currently in the system can fill positions within DYA?
Yes.
Okay, that's actually very relevant because our community program aides only require a high school diploma. And that's one way to come through our agency. And again, because of recruitment lags and just vacancies, what we've done is we've worked with the Department of Labor. And so they do filter through us some of our community program aides. And I think that is an excellent starting point. Now, with regard to the youth service worker, the youth service assistant position, that also just requires a high school diploma. But because we're updating our position description, I don't think it's right that high school graduates just walk into DYA and they supervise kids that are, about their same age. And so I'm actually working again on updating our position descriptions. And one of those things is to put an age requirement of 21 or 25. And so that's something that we're still working on. But certainly any of our kids, and we work so closely with the kids, they always ask, like, what do you need to do to get that job? Miss, how are you the director? And so we're always there mentoring and telling them that you need at least your high school graduation. And so they work really hard. The 5 teachers work really very closely with our kids, and those that are on track to graduate, they ensure that before they come out, they have that in their hands. So I'm happy to say that within the last year, we graduated 3 of our kids.
Thank you, Ms. Brennan. The other thing that we're facing in government is reduction in revenues. So I'm just curious to see, I know this question, sorry to ask this question, but is there like a bare minimum in which DYA would need to operate on? I mean, that's something that, considering that the revenue's coming into GovWam.
I'm sorry, is there a what?
Yeah, so I'm just wondering about the bare minimum as far as operations go. I mean, have you considered that, considering, we're potentially experiencing reduction in revenues in government?
So we already feel that we are at bare minimum because we don't have those 8 vacant, those unfilled positions. And again, like, we've reached out to Department of Labor. We're even using senior citizens to help with admin in our main administration building and in the resource centers. We do feel like, we've done our part. If we need to do more, definitely we'll have to. Even though I only have a PC, I have 1 PC1. We have actively been writing grants, even though we really, excuse me to say, we are not even sure if we're writing them correctly, and submitting budgets based on the needs for reentry, for the things that we see that are really key and important. Again, like, just within the last few months, I'm losing 2 youth service workers, and just the recruitment process, I know that there's no guarantee that I'm going to get a list of eligibles, and there's no guarantee that I'll get these positions. But again, in the past, these lags have helped us survive, so it's what we're faced with. And so we deal with those kind of cuts and shortages and manpower issues on the daily.
All right, thank you. So I just want to follow up with the procurement. So emergency procurement should take place within I was told it can happen within a week. So, I'd be happy to sit down with you and figure out what went wrong with the emergency procurement, and maybe communicate with GSA. What was the situation? How can we improve moving forward? So, emergency procurement should be within 30 days. at least the length of the contract. So I'm surprised that it took 6 to 7 months. That's not acceptable. So I'll look into that.
I do want to say, though, that since that has happened and it was taken care of, we do have an actual better working relationship, and it did mean calling, like, like, we had to talk, and I guess that was one thing. There's no real communication other than, like, paper trails of emails, and so actually talking to someone, picking up the phone and saying, listen, this is, a serious situation. I mean, it took that to finally happen. And it was also a bid process that was at issue.
So just a reminder, sorry, did you have anything else to add to that?
Well, like every other government process, it takes time. So we did try to reach out to other agencies just for the purpose of the chiller. The chiller, it's a component. I guess it's an outdoor unit condenser and the indoor unit as well. So we do have the box inside, so we just need to replace those components. We tried to reach out at the time to other government agencies who have a galley. That didn't work out because nobody had space, or else just they closed down their galley or whatever their reasons are. So it went through the bid process, and this bid process, of course, is done by the General Services Agency. I want to say I need to take a look at the time frame, the exact time frame before we go any further, but the process is lengthy. We have no control over that. Then we also have no control over the vendors that are available. Their availability also on the components, or else the equipment may not be, helpful in any of the whole process, the lengthy process. So, yeah, there was a lot of variables involved.
But we'll call you the next time we have an issue.
Yes, we will.
Thank you. The other thing, this budget time is also a time for planned procurement. So, I mean, when you already have an idea of what you're going to purchase, what services you are going to procure. So I understand that GSA put a call out. They generally put a call out every around before budget time, so that they can consolidate purchases and consolidate procurements. So have you had a chance to kind of look and see what you are interested in purchasing or procuring?
Again, with regard to our chiller, we had a blanket purchase for the maintenance of this unit, but it's already like more than 10 years old, so we didn't anticipate on it going down, but we did maintain it. So those are just unexpected expenses, or else that we had to spur the moment thing that we needed to address. Unexpected expense at that.
It's just like our washers.
Understand, thank you. But also, I just want to recommend that for anything that is on the budget, and maybe send it request, or some sort of initiate the dialogue with GSA in regards to equipment that you feel might need replacing, and they can probably work with you on, preparing for should the time come for those bids.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Senator Barris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Luis Muñoz, ma'am.
Thank you very much. I'm trying to stay warm down here. It's a bit cold. I'll try not to ask the same questions in a different way since I'm last. But thank you, Director, for being here, and your team for putting on such a great presentation. I'm sure you're doing a wonderful job there. We haven't heard otherwise. Thank you very much for that. Just a couple of things. You mentioned some of your collaborative efforts with the nonprofit organizations, and I'm sure that they would welcome that, any opportunities for assistance to help. DYA, and so I just commend you for reaching out to some of the nonprofit organizations. The reentry diversion program, I guess my question would be in that area, what percentage of the kids do you see coming back into DYA again once they are released?
So much of it is anecdotal. Like the officers know who's come back before, and they've, they call them like frequent flyers, the kids that have like kind of grown up through the system. But it's anecdotal in the respect that I can't really track. We don't have a case management system to track it. And so our definition of a recidivist is somebody who comes back to the youth correctional facility for a new charge. That could be very different from probation's or GPD's definition of recidivism, because GPD should have numbers on how many kids that they meet and they don't get charged, they're just deflected back to their parents' house, how many kids are taken into custody, go through to the Attorney General's office, and then are put through a diversion program there and never really formally enter the justice system. So it depends on what you're saying about, recidivists. We are looking at getting a case management system, some software. We asked for it in the case management, in the CARES Act. And so I just had a meeting. We just had a walkthrough, a site visit with Frank Lujan, who is the OTEC head, and he's going to help us institute one so that next year when I come here, I'll have better data, because data really does drive our practices. I want to say that diversion is front end, and hopefully we don't see kids that get diverted, okay? And then, like, if they repeat their offense, then eventually come to DYA as a last resort, then I'll be better able to give you stats then. But a majority of the kids that we currently have repeat offenses. So of the 50 total that are in our care, under our custody, the 30, including the 30 that are at the youth correctional facility, about 90% have been there before.
Okay, and the data also that's collected will also help with some of the grant funding later on, right? So I'm sure that would be a great opportunity for you to access more grants, right?
That's
Through data.
correct, yes.
Okay, and this is in regards to the salaries. I know you were mentioning that it was really hard to fill the position, if not even keep it for long. But if the salary was adjusted for that entry level, I mean, do you foresee like a domino effect in all the other salaries above that position?
I see I'm working towards the whole youth service worker tier reclassification. So yes, that means there would be a domino effect. And I will say that, Senator Moylan had asked about recruitment. Some of the lags are, if I have an opening at DYA and I'm paying the lease, and GPD has an opening and any other law enforcement agency has an opening, I'm not going to get very much on my list. Or when I do interview, they say, oh, well, that's okay. I got, I didn't realize it was in the youth correctional facility, or, I'm going to work for the court or GPD or customs or DOC. Every other law enforcement agency pays more, so.
So working that tier then will help maybe to recruit more and maybe even maintain them?
Maintain and sustain, yes, and retain them.
You really didn't ask very much more in the 2021 budget that you received in this last budget. So I appreciate the fact that you're living within your means and being as frugal as DYA has always been.
Yes, once we get that budget ceiling, we can't really ask for much more.
One of the things that I take special interest in is, where some of the funds from special funds are being appropriated to, most especially the Healthy Futures Fund, because as we all know, it's funded by sin taxes, and personally, I'd like to see it go to exactly where it should be, which is like cancer care and things like that. But it really is a drop in the bucket that you are receiving from the Healthy Futures Fund. But I just have a couple of questions about where it's going. So the Community Social Development Unit and Resource Centers, I see it's about 681,000, a little bit over that. Exactly how many resource centers, I mean, just basically just overview questions. How many resource centers do you have?
We have 3 resource centers. Again, they're in Dededo, Agate, and Manila, as well as I have social workers within the Department of Youth Affairs that help with the kids that are currently residing at either the youth correctional facility or cottage homes. So the numbers that operate the resource centers are very minimal, and that is, again, is why we reach out to the Department of Labor for additional help.
Okay, and so that basically, that money is basically all going towards just salaries to take care of these resource centers?
It's going to supplies too, right? For activities? It's basically, yeah, salaries.
salaries.
But I think that for 2021, we did ask for more programs and activities. We have people constantly coming in, volunteers coming out, but we would like to offer regular routine programs for the kids. There's somebody who's certified on Guam for trauma-informed care yoga. Trauma-informed care yoga is shown to improve kids in the justice system, their ability to regulate their emotions. And so if I could get somebody consistently coming in to teach them deep breathing exercises, how to de-stress, how to handle their anger better through movement and activity, which also tires them out, then you know, those kinds of programs are what we're looking for.
Okay. So, so again, like it really is just a drop in the bucket for from the Healthy Futures Fund, but it's also an opportunity for us to be assured that when we do take from these special funds, that they're going to be allocated in the right areas where, especially with our youth, you know, that it's going to detract them from things that will, you know, that will allow them to.
Yeah, our overarching goal is to improve overall outcomes, right? So that the community is safer and the kids are safer and that they have a place to go. The kids have a dream, have a hope, and they're able to achieve it through links through the community. Community resource centers aren't only for latchkey kids. We also have kids from probation who didn't enter the youth correctional facility go there to see their social worker, to talk to their social worker. We have a contracted therapist that visits the centers as well. So, I mean, we are really talking about healthy futures for all our kids.
Okay. Well, like I said, it's just a drop in the bucket, but it is a very important aspect of your budget too, as well. So, I think that's pretty much all the questions that I have for you. Thank you very much for being here and for your presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Munoz. My colleagues, I'd like to thank you for your question, and Mrs. Brennan and Ms. Tovas, thank you for your presentation. The committee will conclude this budget hearing with the Department of Youth Affairs. The committee will continue to receive testimonies. Please address your written testimony to the Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, and Housing, and submit it via email to Senator Joe S. and Augustine at gmail.com. Si Jesús Marcy for your attendance and participating in today's budget hearing. And for those at home, thank you for watching.